the latest from Davos Now with Pranay Roy.
Now, welcome to a very special interaction with two friends who I shall later describe as two people who presided over the demise of the WTO talks. Lord Mendelsohn, First Secretary of State, and you've got many other titles but I will say First Secretary of State means equivalent to a Deputy Prime Minister, one day to be Prime Minister, and young Kamal Nath, who's been elected for 30 years.
Yes.
And to be Prime Minister one day. So two future Prime Ministers here. No. That's the right answer. That's the right answer, and I know deep down...
We're two modest politicians who just want to serve the people and do a proper day's job and be thanked for it or not.
Peter's pessimistic, I'm realistic. That's the difference.
No, but how did the two of you together just ruin the WTO? There must be a story behind this.
I'll tell you the story.
I think it'd be fair to ask Kamal that.
We were in negotiations, and I asked him, I want to go and see European agriculture because of the subsidies. Right. So both of us sat in a train and drove and went in the train
from Paris to Brussels.
Paris to Brussels to see European agriculture, which was so heavily subsidized. I would refuse to eat with Peter because he was giving me subsidized dinner. You know, everything which was on the plate, on the table, was subsidized. So when we were on this train, I was waiting to see the agriculture. Finally, the agriculture I saw were two fat cows fed on subsidized food whose legs were going like this. They couldn't stand on their feet. Right?
Ruining the ozone layer.
Absolutely. And this is when I think Peter realized that
you had a point.
That I had a point when I said, is that your subsidized, is that your agriculture, European agriculture you talk about? I can understand you talking about European culture, I'll buy that. But you're talking about European agriculture.
And this is when Peter, incidentally, pointed out to the minister that we had already tabled a very, very substantial offer to reduce the protection, the subsidies, the privileges of European agriculture as a very major contribution to the success of the Doha talks. And at the end of the day, I think Kamal was happy with what Europe was offering.
Deep down. But it was so deep.
He was, well, he'd screwed so much out of us by this time, he couldn't fail to be happy. But he was still quibbling over what the United States were prepared to do. And what the United States were demanding of developing countries. And that was an American position. There's nothing I could do about that.
Deep down, you have sympathy for the developing countries. What America was demanding and what they were prepared to do was a bit over the top.
I am an enlightened, progressive Englishman. So, of course, I have sympathy for the developing countries, and indeed when I left school, before I went to university, I made it my business to go and live in Africa for a year in the bush to learn about the development needs of people living in rural poverty. So I had a strong sympathy. I also had, I have to admit...
You had a strong sympathy
I have to also own up to an excessive sympathy towards India. Because, of course, being my grandfather's grandson, my grandfather was Deputy Prime Minister of Britain after the war, and one of his great duties or opportunities, I think actually it was a wish fulfilled by my grandfather. He went with Krishna Menon in August 1947 to India House in the Aldwych in London, and as the Union Jack was pulled down by my grandfather, Krishna Menon, the ambassador and first High Commissioner, put up the new Indian flag side by side, and I have the photograph of it.
Wow, that's something to live up to.
So I was overly sympathetic towards India. I overindulged the minister here.
I don't know whether you overindulged, because what really the Western economies, the developed economies, needed to understand was that it was in their own interest to have healthy economies in developing countries. Now, if there's a healthy economy in Africa, there's a healthy economy in India, we become a big market for them.
So it was self-interest.
I think Peter was able to comprehend this. There were many others around the table.
Coming to Davos, are the two of you doing anything to destroy Davos or ruin the, having done this WTO?
Well, you mean the old double act going again to disrupt the international system? No, we're on the same side, I think.
Well, Davos is so different for India. There's been such a transformation.
You've been here so many years.
I've been here so many years, and I remember just after our liberalization started, people here Indians are invited here really for the color, to keep the coloring all right.
Come on.
Yeah, and
A token Indian.
in 2004-5, they were willing to listen to India, hear India, and they wondered the story which we told them, and in all the programs I went to.
Right.
In 2006, you remember we had the India Everywhere program.
Yes,
here.
yes.
In every bar we had samosas.
Right.
We gave Indian food and
Right.
Indian chaat and things of that sort.
The British national food, chicken tikka.
It
Chicken
is now,
tikka.
yeah.
Right.
Well, and they said this is going to collapse.
Right, you're right.
Now I see this great transformation, and which has taken place where India, everybody's engaging with India. Everybody's engaging with India, which is the big change which has taken place. And
I think this is true, actually. I mean, speaking as a European or really a Brit,
Right.
I mean, what we feel about India is, first of all, a relationship, a partnership, a
Yes.
sort of, there's an emotional thing
Yes.
between us. Secondly, we're excited, almost overwhelmed by the growth of India and the transformation of it. We love the passion and the wisdom. We love the modernity of India, but we love its, heritage and its tradition. These are a wonderful mix. But we also are hard-headed investors. We want to create business. We want to create jobs in India. We want to bring return for ourselves through our business links and through our partnerships, through our joint ventures. And what we see in India, amongst all the fast-growing emerging economies, is a country which is a democracy, which is
Can I
important
just stick
us.
to that point just a second before
Yes.
we go? A democracy, the only democracy in history that's grown consistently at 8%. No other democracy has. Is that important for the average British businessman, that they're investing in a democracy, or does
You feel
Or
you
is it more political?
Look, you identify with a country which is a democracy,
Right.
a bit like your own. You engage with the freedom, the liveliness, the outspokenness, the argumentativeness
Argumentative
of the Indians.
you find him argumentative once in a while?
Because it's do I? But it's like a sort
you
of
find him argumentative more like it.
but Peter's very persuasive, and
Oh.
it takes a lot to persuade him. But once he's persuaded,
he signed up.
yeah,
Signed up.
he's all there.
But let me make this other point
Yes,
as well.
sorry,
if I may.
yes, I interrupted you.
In that sense, it's a sort of home from home because
Right.
we have friendships, we have good joint ventures, we have good partnerships in business. It's sort of easy,
Right.
at that level. Where it's less easy is when the state and the government sort of just comes in and says, "Oh no, hold on a minute, you can't do so much of this, or you can't do that, or you've got to stop up to that limit," and I think
That's what
what's
we learned all
frustrating-
that from the British, getting the government off our backs. That would be
no,
great.
well, you took the great British administrative system and then
Perfected it.
and then you perfected it with an overdose of socialist licensing and over-regulation, I think. And what I've said
Has
in the
that
past,
changed?
what I've said in the past to Kamal and other friends of mine in India, is we see India like a really good modern, fast-moving car which is waiting to race up the motorway, but it's got its handbrake on, and so it's not going as fast or as far as it
Tell
could.
me,
Let the
when
handbrake
will-
off.
Yes, that's a good point. When will the handbrake be released?
Well, I think the handbrake has been released. What we really need to do is to have a attitudinal change in India. We reformed. Dr. Manmohan Singh brought in as finance minister reforms in trade and investment. We calibrated.
Right.
That's why we are where we are today.
Right.
And now the most difficult part of it, which should be the next stage of our reforms, is reforms in governance.
Okay.
And that means, most of all, attitudinal changes also. You can change laws in parliament, you can change regulations, cabinet can change them, but unless you change attitudes. And the British had imbibed a check and balance system in the administration of India, which is the British pattern.
After all this time, is it still our fault?
All your fault.
Well,
all the bad things. Let me just move on. 20 years from now, I'm not going to ask you who's going to win the elections.
In 20 weeks' time?
In 20 weeks' time?
I don't know when
No?
it's going to be.
Okay, now 20 years from now, Davos. You'll be a little grayer and a little older, but what will the atmosphere? Where will India be? Where will China be?
Well, 20 years from now, I see that the World Economic Forum, not being merely in Davos, you'll have it in Mumbai and maybe in Kashmir, and you'll have it in Colorado.
Right.
So you'll have it in turns. That's what I would think.
And
I would wait for the day where the World Economic Forum is so identified with Davos,
right.
moves to Shanghai, to Kashmir.
Will India be ahead of China by then or not?
If we go ahead, because of the demographic advantage we have and the structural advantage we have,
Right.
if we go ahead the way we are going, I think in 25 years we would have overtaken China.
That's a major statement. 20 years from now,
I think that is a major statement, and it's possible, it's conceivable, because the scale of investment, of capital, of technology, of expertise, of pure market dynamism that the developed world wants to bring to India, if India embraced it more,
Right.
And more quickly, then I think that what Kamal is saying could come about. But we will be living in a world there then which will, and I don't mind saying this, relatively we will be a little bit poorer. Relatively, India, China and others will be that much richer. But for all that, the world will have a standard of living and a quality of life which for everyone will be higher and greater, and the world will be a more equal, a more balanced and a fairer place, and I celebrate that.
you say he's pessimistic, he's optimistic. That's great. Or realistic. Thank you.
He's
both.
realistic. He's very realistic, and
when
I
he
think
said-
that for me, I'm optimistic in this case and realistic,
Right.
because we are on a trajectory where unless we really shoot ourselves in the foot,
Which we are quite capable of.
I don't know that we've learnt that what shooting in the foot is all about.
What you need to do is put the foot on the gas a bit, let the handbrake down, and then you're off. Anyway, I said to you at the beginning of this interview that we'd end up agreeing, and we have.
There you are.
Yeah,
Wonderful. That's something, that's a bit of history there.
But
Thanks very much indeed.
we've always agreed at the end.
That's
You know,
right.
when the program is over.
Thank you both very much
Okay.
indeed. That's lovely. Thank you. Welcome to this very special interview with David Miliband, the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good to be back on NDTV.
Yes, it's lovely to have you, but you've been one of the busiest guys at Davos this year. I mean, have you slept?
Well, I did sleep last night, but we've had a busy day today. Lots of people to see and lots of business to do.
And how's Davos changed this year? What's the mood here?
I think that the mood reflects the economic crisis that we've been through. The environmental issue is rather lower down the agenda, which is obviously dangerous, really.
Nervous about another double dip?
I think people are watching a fragile recovery right around the world. They've seen many countries suffering. They're seeing a big debate about the future of our financial system. Davos is a good place to have that. But there's also a sense that economic power is shifting. This is a world where economic power is in transition.
Transition from the west to the east?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, the easiest way to understand it is that, but obviously the rise of...
This is television, so we keep...
But it's NDTV, so it's not
sorry,
completely...
yes, I keep
the rise of India and China to full emergence as strong economies, hundreds of millions of people in the middle class in both these countries, that's a pretty significant shift, and politics lags behind a bit. But I think that people want to find a way of reflecting in international politics some of the integration that's happening in international economics.
Right. So, just compare British relations with India 25 years ago and today.
I think today it's a complete partnership of equals. No one is in any doubt that it's a partnership of real respect, real strength, economically, culturally, politically, from the prime ministers of both countries downwards, and great sense of how lucky we are to have the historical links that
which are
we
very
do.
solid.
Now, I had a great evening on Wednesday evening. It was your Republic Day.
Right.
I came back Tuesday evening. I came back from Istanbul, and the Prime Minister was occupied in Northern Ireland with the Belfast emergency talks, and they said, can you go to the Republic Day celebrations? 1,000 British Indians. Kamal Nath, your minister, was there. And it was a celebration of all that is great, not just about modern India, but about the contribution of British Indians to Britain. And I felt there that it was a relationship that was on a really strong footing, real pride, real respect.
Right. Last time you were in India, you made a very controversial statement, right? I mean, whether you wanted to or not. Would you like to go back and change that statement in any way?
I think that it's very, very important that the respect and engagement that we have with India is celebrated. I think that I came to India as a friend of India. I came in mourning.
I think people are pretty clear of that.
Yeah, I came in mourning at the terrorism in Mumbai, and I'm one of the people who goes to Pakistan and says openly and clearly, anyone associated with the Mumbai bombings has got to be prosecuted.
Right.
And I think that that's a very, very important thing to say. I had a great visit to India and look forward to coming back.
That controversial statement, no regrets about it?
Well, controversy often is independent of what you actually say.
Right.
And so I think that the important thing is that our commitments are absolutely clear. The positions that we take are absolutely clear. And I always say to people, half-truth gets halfway around the world before the truth gets its boots on. And if you look at what I actually say...
So what did you say and what was misrepresented?
Well, I think that to go back over it, honestly...
Would you like to rewind and eliminate
the thing about
edit?
life, in sport you can have action replays if you're a commentator. I'm not a commentator. What I say is that the spirit in which I came, the words that I used in India, the way in which I engaged with complete...
Was one of friendship.
More than friendship. It was one of partnership.
Right.
And a partnership of equals.
Just one last thing on that. On Kashmir, what is your...
The British position has been the same.
Right.
It's been the same throughout the Labour government. It was the same when I was in India last year, and it's the same now. And it's simply stated, which is that the Kashmir issue needs to be decided between the two countries, taking account of the interests of the Kashmiri people. Right. And we've been clear about that all along.
Let's go to the other favourite love of your life, cricket. Who's the greatest cricketer in the world?
The greatest Indian cricketer is Tendulkar, definitely.
Oh, come on, this is the greatest cricketer.
I asked, where was I when I asked Brian Lara, who is the greatest player the greatest bowler that you've faced, and he said Shane Warne. And I wish I'd asked him who is the greatest.
So who is the greatest?
It's impossible, but
batsman.
Tendulkar's got to be up there, yeah. Got to be up there.
Thank you
certainly
very
when
much.
I'm giving an interview to NDTV.
Okay, right. Thanks very much.